Zutara, or the pairing of Zuko and Katara, is the best relationship co-creators of Avatar Brian Konietzko and Michael Dante DiMartino ever wrote. It is also one they did not intentionally write. I reckon that if they did sit down and try to write a relationship like this, it would not be as good. I love Brian and Mike, who have created two of my favorite shows of all time, but writing romance is not one of their strong suits. This may be a controversial opinion, but I can't say I'm much in love with any of the relationships on either of their shows. And yet Zutara is a masterpiece. Two people who grow to see that they have a lot in common and grow to see that they can care about each other, and by caring about each other, move beyond the psychological obstacles that had been haunting them in the past. Zuko helps Katara conquer the darkness inside her because he understands that darkness. Katara helps Zuko learn that he can be understood and that he does not have to fit himself within the contours of the status quo he has internalized. That he can become a more caring and compassionate person. Whether you support the pairing of Zuko and Katara or not, I hope we can all agree that at least platonically, this is a well-written journey of growth and transformation. If you do believe that Zutara should have happened, you'd probably agree with me when I say that this is a better love story than the one they actually did write. It's a journey of compassion and forgiveness and understanding. It's incisive without being overbearing, and warmly kind without overshadowing the rest of the show. So, how does something like this actually happen? How do you accidentally create a relationship that is more compelling than the one you intended to write? I'm interested in this question, so let's investigate it. First, it is important to note that television is not an individual endeavor. I always think back to that great joke on BoJack Horseman about how television is a collaborative medium wherein one person gets all the credit. Acknowledging this is not to diminish the accomplishments of Brian and Mike, but rather to acknowledge that the gift of a great showrunner is not coming up with every single good idea in a show, but rather that a great showrunner knows how to encourage and guide and lead a team. It's as much a managerial job as it is a creative one, and that is a tough tightrope to walk. Konietzko and DiMartino continually pushed for Katang to happen, but that does not mean everyone on the Avatar team felt the exact same way. Now, I'm not implying the existence of some minor-scale rebellion against the creators and Katang. That's the stuff of slightly mad fan theories. These writers and artists and animators tried as hard as they could to bring the showrunner's vision to life, even as they added their own input. But we have to acknowledge that everyone who works on the show in any position has their biases, intentional or otherwise. This is inevitable. Aaron Ahas and his now ex-wife, Elizabeth Welch Ahas, are typically given a lot of credit for the Zuko and Katara scenes, and for Zuko's arc as a whole amidst the fandom. Is this credit wholly deserved? Well, I'm not entirely sure. Judging from the Dragon Prince, I think it's pretty evident that Aaron Ahas is, if nothing else, a better writer of romantic relationships than Konietzko and DiMartino. While The Dragon Prince as a show is not quite as good as Avatar, Raylan, or the relationship between Rayla and Callum, two of the main characters on that show, is better than any relationship in The Legend of Korra or Avatar: The Last Airbender. Still, we have to acknowledge that reports of some sort of war in the writer's room between Katara and Katang supporters that paralleled the war in the fandom at large are greatly overblown. Writers' rooms can become acrimonious at times, but they are not rock bands. There isn't all this yelling and screaming and streams of profanities going back and forth. At least not usually. While conflict in writers' rooms can be about decisions integral to the future of a show, these conflicts are typically on the level of, I want character X to make this decision, while my co-writer wants character X to make that other decision. It's not usually about a mutinous contingent of writers wanting to overthrow the heart of the narrative, and yes, considering how the show constantly promotes Katang, I would say that relationship is integral to the heart of Avatar, even though I have quite a few problems with it. Does Aaron Haas personally prefer Zutara to Katang? I don't know. It's not impossible, and I'm willing to bet that at least a few of the writers preferred Zutara, considering how split the fandom as a whole is. But acknowledging the collaborative nature of television also means we should not assign all the Zutara scenes to Aaron Haas and his ex-wife, and we should not assign all the Katang scenes to Konietzko and DiMartino. It's more complicated than that. I've seen interviewers question a writer or showrunner about a particular choice a character made or a particular writing decision on a show, which by itself is not an unreasonable question, but the writer or showrunner usually shrugs and says that they can't remember who exactly came up with that choice. Usually it's not just one person, and even if it is just one person, other people add on to that idea. And it's not like writers in healthy writers' rooms just keep a notebook about which ideas were theirs and which ideas were someone else's. That is not conducive to a proper artistic environment. But if we can't fully explain the accidental brilliance of Zutara by ascribing it to Aaron and Elizabeth, what can we ascribe it to? As much as I've discussed the collaborative nature of television, which everyone should take into account, the truth of the matter is that the visions of individual showrunners matter too, especially for defining the major contours of the show. Since the showrunners planned from the beginning for the pairing of Katara and Aang to happen, they did not really have to sell that pairing to themselves. And since they didn't have to sell it to themselves, they didn't do as good of a job as they could have done in selling it to the world. They thought that just having Aang constantly crush on Katara and having a few perfunctory feeling romantic scenes between them would be enough to sell the couple to the audience, and considering how split the audience is on Katang, I don't think that was the best strategy. They had already established that this was going to happen, so it was kind of an afterthought. Romance was just sprinkled on. It's not organic. It does not innately come from the character arcs. It's like they had a vision of the show that is otherwise very good, but then are like, oh, hey, we want Aang and Katara to get together, so let's do that too, without really working it into the overall thematic core of the show, or even into the stories of these particular characters. Also, and I really don't want to be too reductionist about this, but the fact that they're both, like, guys in their 20s and 30s when Avatar came out probably didn't help much. I mean, I'm not saying it necessarily would have been better if one, at least, of the showrunners were female, but it is more likely that a female showrunner would have been more willing to explore this relationship from Katara's perspective instead of just centering it all in Aang's perspective. In contrast, Konietzko and DiMartino had a clear understanding of the difficulties innate in bringing Zuko and Katara closer together. They started the show as enemies. To early show Zuko, Katara was nothing more than an annoying peasant who stood in his way of regaining his honor, proving himself to his father by capturing the Avatar. To Katara, Zuko was the symbol of the Fire Nation, the tyrannical country that took her mother away from her and forced her to, as a child, raise herself and her brother, especially after their father left to fight the Fire Nation. The opposition between these two is clear from the beginning, but if there is one thing that Avatar is extremely good at, it is reconciling opposites. About drawing knowledge from a wide variety of sources, as Iroh does when he develops his lightning redirection technique. It's about finding the light in the darkness, as the Legend of Korra outright says. Korra even more directly deals with the reconciling of opposites into the creation of something greater. And a lot of what I love about that show comes from this. It's clearly something that showrunners Konietzko and DiMartino constantly think about. If Zuko's father had not banished him, he would not have grown from a good-hearted but myopic child into an empathetic teenager. Similarly, that Zuko and Katara at first believed that they were completely different and had nothing in common, and then only later learned of the similarities in their shared traumatic pasts, and thus they could understand each other's trauma, is a stroke of poetic brilliance. It's not out of line with Brian and Mike's ethos in Avatar and Korra, and thus I do not think it is completely reasonable to ascribe the Zuko and Katara scenes to influences other than Brian and Mike. The disconnect between the showrunners and a large part of the fandom is that they never considered making this relationship romantic, even if other members on the production team did in fact consider it. The problem I consistently have with how Konietzko and DiMartino write romance is that it seems so superficial, so non-necessary to the heart of the show. It's not the cake, it's the frosting on the cake. The romantic connection between Aang and Katara exists because the writers wanted it to exist. The romantic connection between Zuko and Katara exists because it derives organically from the bond they share, that ever-growing closeness. Its brilliance comes from how Avatar doesn't try to make it romantic with obvious and cliché signifiers. The romantic undercurrent is a consequence of their closeness, which I think is much more intelligent and profound. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching Avatar. It is a brilliant, thoughtful, evocative show. It only gets better and better as you keep rewatching it. It's one of those shows that you see something new and profound every time you begin another watch. And it's easier to watch than ever now that's on Netflix, so don't hesitate. Go rewatch it now, it's really good. Anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.